All right. So just to mention a couple things before we start. So today is the book sale. Just another thing that keep in the back of your mind, and you can tell people, is I'm making a end of the year matching campaign. Sometime this week, hopefully, if everything comes together. It should be really fun, really nice. That's where we will be matching everything double that's donated on a certain day or certain 36 hours. I'm still working to get as high as I can to match. But that's what Chabads do nowadays. It's kind of a way to start the new year. So you start with cash in the bank and you're able to do different things. Anyways, I'm going to share a video now. This is a video about the holiday today. The holiday is called Hey Tavis, the 5th of Tavis. Some of you will remember I speak about it every year. It has today what I want to speak about this holiday, and I want to encourage everyone to buy Jewish books. I'll show you some sales and the reasons why the Rebbe wanted people to buy Jewish books, especially today. As well as the Chabad had won a court case in 1987 and was a big source of joy. It was and we'll talk a little bit about that. So here is, just give me a second. Here is the video. That's a video of me. Okay, here's the video right here that we're going to watch. Holiday, and I want to encourage everyone to buy Jewish books. I'll show you some sales and the reasons why. All right. So here you'll notice the Rebbe speaking, and we'll explain the story a little bit more as well. Oh, 1 second. I usually watch things on 2 times. So.
Oh.
Here, I'll get it.
This is 770 Eastern Parkway. Can you hear the music?
Yeah.
Niet als achelig voor zijn leven in de breed was geweest, of de wasser was getrieben. Achelig voor zijn leven is wie zegt in de kerk achelig, Chai hatzadik is das niet, Chai sorry, das Chai im Ruch nicht. Zij das tot der alte Rebbe in de kerk achelig. Und das ist gleich hoch, aber es nimmt in Emune Nave und hier. Hoe lernt wegen Emune? Wann nimmt richtig Bonus von der Emune? Oder alle wie hier, was das verbunden mit Zehn Amitzis.
You speak in Yiddish?
He's speaking in Yiddish. Yeah, you can see the translation here. I'll explain what he says after.
No, that's okay. I can understand some of it.
Oopsie. Let's see. Good morning, Ellie.
Good morning, Rochelle, I think.
Good morning, Crystal. How are you?
Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, Phyllis.
Oh,
Sorry,
hi,
I just
Phil,
finished
too.
baking. Sorry.
Today, 50% book sales.
Oh,
We're not buying any. We got book.
Oh, look at that.
Wow, what a place.
Wow.
Where is this? Is it in Brooklyn? This is from-
770 Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
Wow, beautiful.
This is from Brooklyn. 770.
Beautiful. Wow.
Noch mehr lebendiger und noch mehr starker, noch mehr zwischen dem Bau, die Dürre und bei jetzt über alle, bis in der ganzen Welt. Darf denn der Schwerwelt kommen, alle seine Chavoten zu sein Leben. Zu sein Leben nicht, sieht er liegt in der Seite oder liegt in der Xar oder liegt in der Hefe, in der Ruf lebt. Dann kennt der nur das Wichtige, also aber weggehen zu diesem Stoff. Und so zusammentragen seine Liebe. Und dann bestellen auf dem Mord. Der Ruhe sehen.
Wow.
Und sie sollen schreien. Wo sollen sie schreien? Die da noch. Und wie mir sagt, da gehe ich in den Siegel von der Juden von den alten Werden. Also in die Teinis, was man gehabt zu lernen. Oder der Rufe offen werden. Fußen absein der Isoko und in Fußen absein der Isoko. Schaß mir Wind bringen. das ist der einzige Pio. Und ihnen Idee durch auf Zukunft, haben wir von ihm Koch und noch mehr, ich lebe ever, in der Gottes am Majonis so.
So this is just a small video. They made a larger video. It's called A Movement on Trial. There is a, today is Hey Tavis. It was a very powerful Hasidic holiday, and I want to just make mention today because, as I said, all the, give me stop that. All the book sales are today.
Oh, yeah.
This is, so all the book sales are today. And the reason is, and I'll just tell you the story, and I want to tell you a little bit about buying Jewish books, a little bit than buying other books. And that's what I want to focus on one part today. The other thing I want to talk about today is the famous Haftarah of yesterday. Yesterday, I mean, we haven't had a Minyan Shabbos for a while, but the Haftarah that we would have read yesterday is actually read once. The last time it was read was 20 years ago. And fascinating Haftarah. It's a very rare Haftarah to read. It's very, very fascinating. Now, I just want to say another thing. I want to say that this class, I want to dedicate in the merit of the Refuah Shlema, the complete recovery of Sarah Bas Yidis. She's a 97-year-old lady in an old age home who got COVID yesterday. In one of the beautiful things you'll find in religious, Orthodox communities is they fight for people's life as if they were a child. Even if they are 119 years old and in 2 hours they're going to turn 120, they will fight for their life, like no matter what. And even the doctors in New York know that the families, they call up, what is the best doctor? And they'll say, hey, your mom's 90, she lived a good life. And they'll, no, we need the best doctor. She needs to live 10 more years or 20 more years, So that's one of the things actually was kind of unusual for us to get used to here. Here, when people were sick or whatever, they say, oh, they lived a good life. They lived a good life. Right. But in Jewish tradition, we value life so much, even one day, fighting for a life of one day of someone who's late in their 90s. And praying for miracles is, very regular. So we hope she has a complete recovery. She's one of the great rooms here. Unfortunately, COVID has spread around there a little bit, and she got it yesterday or 2 days ago. She was tested positive. Nothing.
Where is she? Is she in Prescott?
Prescott Valley.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, just wanted to make mention of that. Okay. Now I want to talk about Hey Tavis. We saw that video there, and there's something quite interesting, and it's related to what we studied in Talmud a couple of years ago when we were studying Megillah. So we had an interesting question over there. We said, can you sell an old Torah for a new Torah?
Oh.
We sell an old Torah and take the money to buy a new Torah. So if you remember, the Gemara actually did not come to a conclusion. But it said, you can sell a Torah. If you have a Torah and you need to get married, you haven't found a spouse yet, you can sell a Torah for that spouse. Or you can sell a Torah, let's say you want to support yourself. So this was very common in the olden days. But really, it should be that way this way. The goal of everybody was to be able to just sit and study Torah the whole day. That was the goal. And so people would save up money and they would sell their belongings. And that way they could take a year off and study Torah. Just study Torah. Not to become anything, but just to have knowledge of the Torah. So it says you're allowed to sell a Torah, to get married, or to have money to study Torah. Because when you study, you'll study Torah, it will bring you to action and it will do good things. Right. The Gemara then says a very interesting thing, and I want to read it to you. Let me just find it here. I'm looking up my pocket Talmud on my phone. The Gemara says, let's say you don't have what to eat. You're starving. Are you allowed to sell a Torah? So this is very interesting. It says our sages taught, a person may not sell a Torah scroll even if he doesn't need it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who's one of the great rabbis, one of the great leaders of the Jewish people in the Mishnah era, he said, even if a person has nothing to eat, and out of his need, he sold a Torah scroll, or he sold his daughter to be a maidservant. So the Torah says one of the things you can do is if you can't support yourself and you can't support your family, you can sell your daughter to be a maidservant in a very honorable way, and she'll work somewhere and they'll support her like a daughter. So he never sees a sign of blessing from the proceeds of either sale. So if you have a Torah and you're starving, he says you're allowed to sell it, but you won't see blessings. If you can hold out a little bit longer, you'll make it through. If you sell it, you won't see blessings. So you'll have food for that day, but who knows what will be the next day. This is what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says. So it sounds kind of extreme, right? But this is actually what we're going to talk about. That's what the Rebbe was speaking about in the video. The previous Rebbe had amassed a very large library. And he was very into library. And one of the treasures of the library were the handwritten documents by holy rabbis, handwritten books. He took his library with him as much as he could. He lost some of it in Russia and Europe. He brought whatever he could to America. In fact, till today, there was an interesting article in one of the newspapers, actually. I'll talk about that soon. But they brought the books to America. They're located underneath 770. There's a gigantic library, a priceless library under there. And for many years, the Rebbe worked on bringing back that library. Because as the Rebbe says in the video there, the writings of great rabbis are not just their books, not just information, it's their soul. It's the soul of the Jewish people. But Jewish books are the soul of the Jewish people. That is what keeps our continuity. If not for Jewish books, who knows how much more we'd assimilate and disintegrate. But as a result of the Jewish books, that kept our beliefs together, and that's what kept the Jewish people together, and that's what kept the Jewish people throughout every villain, every war, and every genocide that we've had, which we've had many. So Jewish books are the soul of the Jewish people, and that's what the Rebbe said in the video we just said before. What happened is they found one of his nephews in the 80s was stealing books from the library and selling them. I mean, some of these books could fetch millions of dollars, handwritten books for collectors. And the Rebbe was of the opinion, no, they're priceless. They're all priceless. They're all holy. So his nephew, who was a grandson of the previous Rebbe, started stealing the books. They caught him and they told him, hey, you can't take those books. You're not an heir for them. The previous Rebbe never wrote that you would inherit them. So he actually sold, and several of them they wanted to get back. People said, oh, let's just buy them back. But the Rebbe said, we have to take care of the problem. So they took him to a rabbinic court. He said, no, I'm going to take you to a federal court. And actually, he went into the federal court. It was a very, very difficult couple of years for the Rebbe. And what the Rebbe virtually explained was the battle is not just a battle of will, of bequeathment. This is actually a battle of the definition of what a Rebbe is and what Hasidism is and what the Jewish people are. And even the father actually of the nephew, who the Rebbe's brother-in-law said, this isn't a battle over wealth. This is a battle over the benkel. The benkel means the seat of the Rebbe. The Rebbe was of the opinion that the previous Rebbe and all Rebbes live on forever because Jewish people are spiritual people and their holiness lives on in this world forever. And the Rebbe had felt, and they had felt that his nephew felt, no, it's just kind of like a family. They die and moves on, things move on in life. Now, this battle was fascinating as it went all the way to the federal court. And in the federal court, it was decided that the previous Rebbe was not an individual, independent person. In fact, he's a leader, and a Jewish leader is devoted to the Jewish people, and therefore the library belongs to the Hasidim and does not belong to, it's not a family thing, it belongs to the Hasidim. This is always how the Rebbeim treated the scriptures of holy rabbis. This is always how they did it. And that's just an important thing to mention, and we're going to tie it around in Jewish history. And that could be why Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, because if you have a Torah and you're starving, he said, if you sell it, you won't see a blessing. Because the Jewish people's survival is really a highly spiritual thing. It's not just about, eating and wealth and passing it on to our children. It's actually a highly spiritual thing. And that's actually how Jewish people survived against all odds. The odds were all on the material side, and the survival was all on the spiritual side. I know someone, one of the people who I know who took COVID the hardest, was a friend from New York. He's about 38, 39, and for some reason he just really took it hard, and he was in the hospital for months and months and months. He finally got out after a lot of rehabilitation and literally miracle after miracle. So I just last week he had a sort of liver failure, and he went back to the hospital, and they said it was the most dangerous time that he had. So the doctor told his wife, he said, you know, your husband's on the way to death. Just I want you to know that. So she was talking to her family member, and she said, well, he's still also alive. So why don't we say he's on the way to living, you know? There's always those two views. So so here's what so that was actually the battle. It was a legal battle. And there was a lot of crooked play in between, but ultimately the judges decided that the previous Rebbe was not a personal man, and Hasidism and Judaism is not just a personal religion. It's not that you happen to be Jewish or you happen to be a Chassid because your parents were or whatever it was, but actually this is a transcendent belief system which lasts forever. So what happened was that these are the words he said, Zidan Natzach. Zidan Natzach are the words in Hebrew that we won. The Rebbe said, you know, the fact that it had to go to the civil court was a sign, and actually I just played an excerpt from the video. You can watch the whole video, but the fact that they won was a sign that they went into federal court, that even, you know, the federal court, which the federal court is not spiritual, it's the civil court, even they admitted that the previous Rebbe was not a personal person, and on the contrary, that his legacy is still alive in the world. And that was the purpose of this court case. Anyways, what happened is Chassidim from all over, this was after years of battle, they traveled to New York and they celebrated for many days. It was such a great celebration. And the Rebbe said that this, actually today, he said anyone who writes to the Rebbe and writes a letter and he'll read it at the Ohel of the previous Rebbe, he said, you know, your prayers will be answered. So traditionally people write a letter to the Ohel today with prayers. They send it to New York and it goes into the resting place of the Rebbe. People do it today. There's a fighter jet flying over my house. Okay, I hope we did everything okay. All right. Anyways, so just hear it and then see it by the window. Okay. So then the Rebbe said today is the day to buy books. The books won. This was a victory of the books. So I just want to give you a little bit of a background about the Rebbe and buying books. And in New York, there's actually 50% sales on some of the publishing. And when the Rebbe won those sales, he said, I would say, the first time the Rebbe said, I would say 50%, but the publishing house would get mad at me because they're going to lose money if it's 50% off. So we'll do 20% off, you know? But there are actually books that they do bite the bullet on because it's so important to remember how important Jewish books are. Now, I want to give a little background about buying Jewish books and Chabad and the Rebbe, and I'll share actually some interesting information. All right, let me see. All right, wrong page. No, give me a second. Sorry, just going to give a little background. This is very interesting. Oh, here it is. Okay. The Rebbe actually, when it came to Chabad rabbis, he said that there's 10 campaigns. What does Chabad do? There's 10 campaigns. Here's a picture of the 10 campaigns. This is an oldie picture. This is a picture of the 10 campaigns that the Rebbe made throughout the years. And he said these 10 campaigns would actually be the pathway to keeping Jews Jewish and spreading light to the world and bringing Mashiach. So, you know, some of them you'll recognize. Some of them I can strengthen myself in. But here we have the first one of fixing a mezuzah. So that's the mezuzah campaign. Every home should have a kosher mezuzah. Tefillin, right? The tefillin campaign is every male should put tefillin on. Daily study of Torah. Here the Rebbe said that every single person should take time every day to study Torah. Torah education, this is for children. Then loving your fellow Jew. This is actually kind of a lot of times considered the overall campaign. If you love your fellow Jew, you'll help them do the other things. Mitzvah tzedakah. The Rebbe said every person should give tzedakah every day. That's actually how it was totally defined. I'll skip the one we're going to talk about. Shabbos candles. All women should light Shabbos candles. Keeping kosher. Everyone should have kosherize their home. Eat only kosher. We're grateful that nowadays you can buy kosher food easily from primenosh.com. You can literally order it, and oftentimes it will arrive in less than 24 hours. So, I mean, if you order it tomorrow, it'll arrive Tuesday morning, potentially, depending on when your FedEx guy comes. Prime Nosh, they have great prices, and I actually feel that when it comes to the kosher campaign, they have done a tremendous amount. Anywhere in America, you can buy kosher meat and kosher fish and kosher products, and they will overnight it for $15. Okay, anyways, that's keeping kosher. Taras and Mishpacha, this is the campaign of women going to mikvah, right? Family purity, it's called. And then finally one, we have Jewish holy books. This one is actually called Bayis Malei Sfarim. Bayis Malei Sfarim is very interesting. It's a term used in the Jewish tradition actually for a negative thing. But Bayis Malei Sfarim means a house full of books. Ultimately, your house should have every wall that you could, not your bathroom, et cetera, should be covered with Jewish books. This is a campaign that was very dear to the Rebbe, and I just want to give you a little history of how it started. And the emphasis on it is not only that you should spend the money and buy the books, but you should also study them. And I'll tell you the different reasons the Rebbe said for this campaign soon. You should get books for, this includes Torah books, Jewish kids books. This includes kosher cooking books, right? This is Bayis Malei Sfarim, a house full of books. But there's really more to it in the history than just just the face value. Now that's why today, where the victory of the books happened, there's actually sales today, and I will show. There's actually sales today, and I'll just show you, for example, a sale page that I have here. So actually, this is a set of books that I'm considering buying, but here you have a sale. This is the Chabad Publishing Society. So their sale is usually more than other ones, but it's really a grand sale. A lot of books, depending on where they're printed, some of them are just a couple dollars off. Some of them are 50% off. And a lot of times, I'll show you an example of popular sets. The set of the lessons in Tanya is $65 instead of $120. Depending on who published the book, some of them are printed by them, and some of them are printed by other printers who are affiliated with them. So depending on that is really the price of the book. But anyways, today is the day of Bayis Malei Sfarim. It's a day where it's an opportunity to fill your books. All Jewish publishing houses have book sales. And if you want some recommendations, I'll give you some recommendations after. But what I want to talk about is the history of Bayis Malei Sfarim, the history of the campaign of filling your house. Now, I saw Jerry wink when I said you got to fill all your walls with books. Obviously you have to do it in a peaceful way in your house. You can't override anyone. But it's a really important, beautiful thing that we can do today and now, especially today that it's so easy to print books. I mean, they print them all in China now. The availability is amazing. Now, I have a little problem. I pre-ordered certain books that were going into print this week, actually thousands of dollars worth. There were certain sets which are rare, and I ordered them. And I told Bracha today, I said, I have to buy books today, and I already have, coming this year, many more books. The Rebbe said you could also buy more bookshelves. That's another way you can celebrate today. I definitely need a lot more bookshelves. Unfortunately, I need probably a good 5 or 6 new shelves, but I already have backup books in boxes. But anyways, I just want to talk a little about the history of buying Jewish books in Jewish history and why it's so important and so symbolic of Judaism. It's not just collecting books that you will read or not read. So the first time the Rebbe mentioned this campaign was actually after the Yom Kippur War. Now, the Yom Kippur War was an interesting war because although the Jewish people were successful and they were victorious, and there were many miracles in the Yom Kippur War, many soldiers died. There were many casualties, thousands of casualties. And the morale of the soldiers was very low. And the morale of a lot of Israelis was very low. I mean, it was a tremendous loss. It was a tremendous loss. So there were a lot of different suggestions that people did. The Rebbe actually said, we can boost their morale in many ways, but I think one of the ways we can do it is going back is strengthening Jewish observance. He said, what we're going to do is every soldier and every person in their home, they should have a book of the Torah maybe the Torah or the Psalms. They should have a siddur, a prayer book, and they should have a tzedakah box. These three things. In the Pirkei Avos, it says the world stands on three things: Torah, study of Torah; avoda, prayer; and gimel chasadim, acts of kindness. So he said, if we have one of these three things in every room and every house, every soldier gets one of these three things, that will boost the morale of the soldiers. The previous Rebbe actually had a certain set of books that he said every home needed. Now, eventually, the Rebbe expanded it and said you should buy as many books as you can at every opportunity to buy books. And these are the things that they will cause. Now, when the previous Rebbe came to America, there were a lot of Jewish people who were assimilating simply because they were farmers, literally farmers. There are many Jews who stuck to the big city, but many Jews moved to the small town America. And one of the most fascinating things in Prescott is I found is in the East Coast and the West Coast, everyone lived in the big cities. But in Prescott, everyone's grandparents were sharecroppers. And you hear fascinating stories. One of the people in town, he's writing a book, but his grandfather, his great-grandfather lived in South Dakota, and there was a fire on his farm and it burnt down the whole town. Anyways, everyone there was God-fearing, so they accepted it, but it didn't look good that the Jewish guy's farm burnt down everyone's farm. So his son actually moved to California, and he did very well in the business world. And he actually went back and repaid all the kids of all those farmers. He repaid, and the person told me they were actually in the car with him, and he was writing checks of $10 million, and because some of these were big farms. But anyways, the previous Rebbe started sending yeshiva students to these farms to find the Jewish people, and what he wanted them to do is sell books to them. He said, if you have a Jewish book in your house, you'll see it, your grandchildren will see it. The book's probably not going anywhere. That's why it's so important nowadays, even though we should get all the Jewish apps and everything's online nowadays, and it's amazing, but it's so important also to have the physical books. As we all know, at least I think everyone here knows, there's nothing like a book, right? Even though it's a little bit more expensive and a little bit more, but it's not like reading on the phone. So the Rebbe gave some practical reasons why it's important to have these books in your house. Number one, people will read them. If you had them, you'll eventually study them. Number two, we find, and this is actually how the Rebbe spoke about it. He said that we find that when the Kohanim would do the service in the temple, the Talmud uses a terminology. It says they would announce that the east is lightened until Chevron. They wanted to mention the forefathers when they were doing service in the temple. Every Jew can use some extra zechus, can use some extra merit. Even they were doing the sacrifice in the temple, they said in the merit of our forefathers in Hebron, right? So Jewish people can always use some extra juice and extra merit. When you have the holy books in your house, it's actually kind of bringing all those holy rabbis into your house, all those holy rabbis who wrote those books. Another thing the Rebbe suggested. Now, the Rebbe said it's not just that your house has books, but actually your house becomes a book holder, a holy book holder. Everything that a Jew has should be dedicated to God, right? That's why we're here in the world. We're here for a mission in the world. Everything we have, the purpose of it is to serve God. So when your house is full of Jewish books, your house actually changes. It becomes a bookshelf for holy books. Everything, your home becomes dedicated. It's a holder of holy books. So that is another importance, and we're going to focus on that soon. And the Rebbe actually said that it's the campaign is to buy both adult books, holy books, children books, and also libraries. Library books. There should be local libraries and stuff like that. That's an opportunity to buy books for local Jewish libraries. So I want to go back now. One other thing the Rebbe suggested: the last mitzvah in the list of mitzvahs, there's 613. Number 613 is every Jewish person is supposed to write a Torah. Now, not everyone knows how to do that. In fact, I don't really know anyone in Prescott who knows how to write a Torah. It's very difficult. But luckily, the rabbis explained that you can also commission a Torah. Now, commissioning a Torah could cost, $30,000. It could cost $50,000. It's very expensive to write a Torah. It's a very big mitzvah, and it's a beautiful thing to do. But sometimes it's a lot of money. So a lot of times when people write Torahs, what they do is they actually sell some of the letters so people can have some ownership of writing the Torah. The Rebbe actually made a campaign that every child should have a letter in the Torah. And he said, you send $1, and all my kids have letters in the Torah. Send $1 to a place in Israel, and they'll write a letter for $1. And that's another way of doing the mitzvah. Actually, the next year, the Rebbe said, people complain about my speeches, and I usually, they're not good. They're wrong a lot of times, but this time they're right. They said the adults want the opportunity also, so they started adult Torahs. So that's another way of doing it. But another way is actually by buying and owning Jewish books. The oral part of the Torah for many years was not written, but now it's written. And a couple thousand years ago, they started to write the oral Torah. And by owning the Jewish books, by buying them, you actually get the mitzvah of writing a Torah. So that's another reason why we need to do it. Now, going back and just discussing what we're talking about just two of the points ago. When you buy books in your house, it actually causes like eternal spirituality in your house, and that your whole life is dedicated to those books now, right? Because your house is holding those books. There was an interesting kind of play in Jewish law that the Rebbe said. So on Shabbos, you're not allowed to carry anything out of your house on Shabbos. Anyone aware of that law? One of the ways of doing work on Shabbos, you're not allowed to carry from a private domain to a public domain. Now, the rules of Shabbos are very technical. What are you not allowed to carry? What are you allowed to carry? So now let's say you carry a book out on Shabbos. So you broke Shabbos. Let's say you carry a pot out on Shabbos. You also broke Shabbos. You're not allowed to carry a pot outside. Now, the law says that if you're carrying food out on Shabbos, it has to be a reasonable amount of food. If you carry one bean, that's not carrying on Shabbos, because that's not a reasonable amount. It has to be whatever the food is, whatever's considered reasonable for that, or different foods have a standard size. So the Talmud asks a question. It says, what if you carry a pot with an unreasonable amount of food out? Do you look at the pot and say, hey, if you carry a pot out, you're not allowed? Or do you say, no, the pot is just carrying the food, and the food is a low amount. It's less than the measurement necessary to break Shabbos. Anyone can guess? Anyone can guess what the answer is? So the Talmud says, you didn't break Shabbos, because the whole purpose of the pot is to hold the food, and the food is less than the reasonable amount that we're talking about. So as a result, the Rebbe said the same thing with a house full of books. It's not enough just to have Jewish books in your house. Your house has to be like the vessel, the pot for the books. And when you do that, when you dedicate that your house to that, then it only grows. So now I just want to talk about modern days. So anyways, I just recommend you buy books today. It's so important to have Jewish books. Those are the soul of the Jewish people. And in fact, that's why Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in the Talmud says, he says, sell a Torah to eat food. If you eat food, that's physical life, but spiritual life, that will keep us going forever. So it's so important to buy books and remember that that's the soul of the Jewish people. And that's literally how the Rebbe looked at it. Now, there are still books in Russia that they didn't get out. And the Rebbe fought for those books. In fact, the Rebbe said when those books come out, Mashiach will come. Those are like the souls of hundreds of rabbis who are stuck still in Russia and haven't been brought back to their proper owner, which is, the 770 library. So actually, as a couple of years ago, there's a world court order from the American courts that Russia has to return the books. And Russia has been fined $50,000 every day for several years now. It's actually allotted to over $100 million that Russia owes the Chabad movement. Now, Russia tried all different things. One of the things they tried to do is said, how about we'll make a museum? We'll make a Chabad museum. We'll keep the books here, but it will be accessible by Chabad. And it was very clear that the Rebbe said, no, the books have to be returned to their owner, which their owner is the 770 library. So,
Rabbi.
One of the things that's interesting about it is there's only one Russian building in New York, which is owned by Russia, which exists in America, which technically the Chabad movement can seize. It's actually a nuclear research building. So anyways, if Chabad gets access to atom bombs and stuff like that, you know why. But the truth is it's worth about $100 million, and that's how much they're owed. So the court said they could seize that building. But of course they don't want the money. They don't want the building, they want the books. So this is something that the Rebbe really looked at. The books are the soul of the Jewish people. These are like living rabbinic souls in these books, invested in these books. And when you buy them in your house, it can actually transform your house. So that is the plug I want to give today for Hey Tavis. I will recommend some books. I'll probably email them out today. There are great sales, tremendous sales. I mean, every year I always look at it and it's like, there are so many new books that come out and there's so many books that come into print. It's a really incredible thing. There's English books, there's Hebrew books. The Rebbe said, you could buy one book, but it's really a great opportunity to buy them and read them. Now, that's the plug for Hey Tavis today.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes.
Are
Yes.
any of the books in Yiddish?
Oh yeah, most of them.
They are mostly.
There's
Okay.
more. I have probably more books in Yiddish than Hebrew in my house.
Got it.
Um,
I don't know if you're
Or
familiar
English.
with. Oh, I was going to say, I don't know if you're familiar with the term. Well, you probably are, but Zomler and Aaron Lansky has sent people all over the world to collect Yiddish books, and I don't know if you are you familiar.
Yeah, I
with
actually have the book about that.
I've met him. He's a
Yeah.
fascinating man. But
Well, so most of the books of the Rebbe
Yeah.
actually,
yes,
which I'll be honest, I bought a $900 set this year. It was a set that I really splurged on, but it's out of print, and every couple of years they print it if people invest in it, and it's usually $1,300, and this year it was $890. So I held my breath and I just bought it really quickly. I'm not going to get it to my house for a few months because they're printing. They basically they said if we can get enough of a group to buy it, we can print it for that cheap. And really, like, no one's really making profit on it, but it was just an opportunity to buy it, and it's all in Yiddish.
Oh.
It's 51 volumes of the Rebbe's talks in Yiddish, and it's actually the original typesetting. So it's actually the original writings of it, and so it's an interesting opportunity to buy. There are many in Yiddish. There are many translated in English. Every year there are new books translated in English, but it's really what I've come to see for my family. It's not just about buying the book and doing it, but actually buying and having Jewish books in your house is a very transformative thing. People come, they see the Jewish books there, and they see that, oh wow, here's living a Jewish family, a Jewish person, And besides that, you'll come to study from them and everything like that. So it's really, really an important thing, and it really shows what our Jewish lives are about. So that is the plug for Hey Tavis. I just want to talk about the Haftarah yesterday a little bit, just for a few minutes. It's a very fascinating Haftarah, and it is connected with Hey Tavis. Again, Hey Tavis, the 5th of Tavis. So today, if you have two things you can do is buy some books online. And I know some suckers for buying books on this Zoom thing right now, who always end up spending more than they wanted to. But then again, it's a really good thing. It's a really good investment. The other thing I want to talk about is yesterday's Haftarah. So yesterday's Haftarah is a very short story, but it's a fascinating story, and it's one that everybody knows. I'm going to say the story now, even though you know it, and I want to say some of the commentary on it and some of the lessons we can learn from it. Now, just to mention another thing, I mentioned at the beginning of the class, just before I forget, I'm hopefully doing a matching campaign this week, one of the days this week. I'm seeing if I could put together a few more matchers and everything like that, because it's an opportunity to enter to 2021 with with a significant amount of money in the bank, and that always accelerates things in Chabad. So far we have $15,000 to be matched, so that would make 30. But I'm gonna. It's the end of December, so you could pass on to your friends and everything like that. I'm gonna try and get a little bit more on the matching side because it's an opportunity to match it. And often you make matching campaigns, there's always kind of a blank area, but it's good to have a few months in advance for the coming year, especially. Anyways, so yesterday's Haftarah is the story of King Solomon. King Solomon has this famous story, and it's the most famous story of King Solomon, perhaps one of the most famous biblical stories. It's the story of the two harlots. In Hebrew, it's called the Mishpat Shlomo. Shlomo was a judge. He was the king, right? It's the story of the two harlots. What happened with the two harlots? Anyways, they both got pregnant, and they both had a baby. And they were both living in the same house. Sound familiar yet? Anyways, they both come to court, and one of them says, we both had a baby, we were sleeping with our babies, right? We were co-sleeping with our babies. They encourage people. Well, some people encourage people not to do it nowadays. Some people encourage people to do it. I guess two schools of thought out there. But they were sleeping with their babies, and one of their babies unfortunately suffocated. So that mother went and she took the other baby in the middle of the night. Anyways, they come to King Solomon, and King Solomon hears their claims. He repeats their claims. Actually, we learn from there that a judge always has to make sure he heard correctly and repeat what they said to make sure they approve of what they said, right? And then he says, okay, we will cut it in half. Right? Anyways, one mother says, that's a good idea. Right? If I can't have it, she can't have it either. And the other mother says, don't cut the baby in half. Let him live. Give the baby to her. So King Solomon says, you are the real mother, right? This is the famous story. He says, you are the real mother. And the end of the Haftarah says, the Jewish people said, oh boy, we better behave. We have a judge who will be able to figure things out. Give me a second. All right. So this is the story of King Solomon. It's a fascinating story. There's not a major amount of commentary on it, not a major amount of lesson on it. We usually, yesterday's Shabbos falls out in Hanukkah. So the last time we read it was 20 years ago, actually. It's a very rare Haftarah to read, but it's such a famous story. Such a famous story. So I just want to talk about some of the commentary that we see from it. So I'm not going to go into it fully, but I'm going to just go into some of the fascinating discussions. So first of all, what is the big deal, right? What is the big deal? King Solomon is the smartest of all men in history, right? He's the smartest of all men in history. What is the big deal by him saying, proving who the real mother is? It's kind of obvious. I mean, I remember as a child thinking, like, obviously the real mother is going to let the baby live, right? I mean, the other mother saying that would possibly be mentally ill, right? So there are several explanations, and there's several discussions, and I want to just go through some of them quickly, and then we'll finish off with one explanation, and then you can all go buy your books today. So another interesting discussion is, one of the commentaries says, how did King Solomon know? You know, one of the commentaries says King Solomon knew which baby belonged to who, right? King Solomon knew which baby belonged to who, but he needed to prove it to the people. He needed to get them to admit it. King Solomon was really miles ahead. Now, it's very difficult in Jewish law if there's no witnesses, right? If there's no witnesses, it's very, very difficult to judge something, especially in Jewish law. The witnesses are so essential. They're so much more essential than civil law, actually, in Jewish law. So King Solomon knew who it was, and he played out this story to show who the real mother was. But this begs another question. How did King Solomon know? So one of the commentaries suggests, he says King Solomon saw that this baby looked like this mother, and the other baby, which is questionable if the other baby was there, looked like the other mother. But either way, he saw this was clearly this mother's baby, right? That begs the question, if halachically, according to Jewish law, can you judge a case like that just by looking at faces? That's anecdotal evidence, right? That's anecdotal evidence. The law actually extends to Jewish law with DNA, right? You can see someone's a child with DNA. Can you determine halachically that this child belongs to this person because DNA? So this is a very shaky question. This is a very difficult question because even DNA is not 100%, right? And for sure, when you're looking at a baby, it's not 100%. We do find a story in the Torah that it says God made Isaac look like Abraham. Because people said, Jerry said, Abraham, he can't have a baby. He's 100 years old. So God made them look so similar that even Jerry would admit that they must be father-son. The Talmud, the Midrash continues. It says, Abraham didn't like it. He looks exactly like his son. People are mistaking them. So God started this new thing where older people go gray. They get white hair.
Right.
And Abraham finally looked different than his son Isaac. So, you can thank Abraham for that. Anyways, everyone's trying to undo it now. But well, the truth is nowadays it's kind of in style to have white hair. A lot of people dyeing their hair white. I mean, there's even like young people who, for whatever reason, their hair goes gray really young, and they consider it cool. You know, that's what's the way it is now. But anyways, so that leads to a whole kind of messy discussion. But they say that basically Solomon knew, for whatever reason, he knew that they looked the same, and he was looking for a way to prove it. And what he was showing what to the Jewish people was, you can't get away with murder, literally. You can't get away with murder because we will find a way to track you down and prove it. That is one of the interpretations. Another interpretation says that King Solomon knew that naturally, you know, they always say you should love your fellow as yourself, right? So what does it mean to love yourself? So there's different views. I mean, some people feel loving yourself should mean the way you treat yourself, right? I once heard a rabbi say, he said, you know, you ever realize most people never roll off their bed? You know, that's pretty cool. You're asleep, you don't roll off your bed. That's kind of amazing, right? I mean, maybe, you know, kids do sometimes, but even kids rarely. Adults, I mean, as a teenager, I used to sleep on the top bunk in yeshiva. There were no, and I thank God I never rolled off. That would have been about 5 feet, you know? So he said, you know, mothers naturally would never strangle their child. It just can't happen. When he saw that a mother when he saw that it happened to a mother, he said, this mother must have issues, right? And obviously, she is, you know, probably not good for her to be a mother. That's another commentary.
Wow.
Now I want to get to another way of looking at it. We'll talk about something which is we just have a couple more minutes. That's why I'm summing this up. But the Rebbe once spoke about this idea, and he said, you know, the reason why I read the Haftorah yesterday is because in the Parsha, it talks about Pharaoh's dreams. Last week's Parsha, or yesterday's Parsha, talks about Pharaoh's dreams, right? So the story is Pharaoh has a dream of 7 skinny cows, 7 fat cows, and the 7 skinny cows devour the 7 fat cows, right? Joseph comes and says, there's 7 years of famine and 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. So in the Haftorah, this Haftorah starts off with King Solomon having a dream, and then it has this story. Now, there is a very interesting outlook that the Rebbe takes in the story. He says, what essentially happened here? God, King Solomon, had these 2 mothers there, and he aroused the motherly love in one of them. He aroused the motherly love, that the mother was willing to have a sacrifice, not see her child, not even consider the child her child, for the life of her child. That's the natural motherly love that people. That's what King Solomon essentially did. He aroused the motherly love that one mother had, and that showed who the true mother was. In this week's Parsha, we have kind of a similar thing. The 12 brothers come to Joseph, and Joseph wants to see if they regret what they did. Furthermore, Joseph wants to see, he'll capture Benjamin. Benjamin is the only son who's his blood brother from father and mother, right? He wants to see, have these guys repented? Are these guys being nice to Benjamin? Would they be nice to him because they share the same father and mother? He aroused the love that they have for Benjamin as well. Now, they both Haftorah start with a dream. And what Hasidism explains is our life is really a dream. You know, philosophers always wonder, is our dream our true life? Or is our life a dream? Or is it vice versa? Our life is real and their dream's a dream. So in Judaism, we believe that exile is a dream. The reason why we live in tough times and bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people, is because we're living in a dream. In a dream, crazy things happen, right? And that's what we're living in right now. We're living in a dream. But the purpose, and when Mashiach comes, we're going to look back. King David says, and we're going to look back and say, oh, you know, sometimes you have a dream, and sometimes on Thursday I rented a truck and I drove around a little bit to people who couldn't get out of their house, and we made like a little Hanukkah parties in the back. So they gave me like a $70,000 truck. I mean, this was a Silverado 2500 HD. This was the top of the line machine. I mean, you should have seen it. I'll send you a picture. I sent the picture in the email. So anyways, I needed to return it Friday morning. So I was actually, I had a nightmare that I didn't return it, and I returned it a week late. They gave it to me for free, but it was a thousands of dollar bill. You know, I woke up and I said, "Oh, great, it's only Friday, right? Didn't happen." So when Mashiach comes, we're also going to do that. We're going to wake up and say, "Now we're going to come. God will reveal Himself, and we'll say, oh, phew, that was a dream, right? That was a tough dream. It lasted 2,000 years."
Yes.
Same thing here. The dreams that we have, the purpose of the dream, first of all, you got to remember that life is but a dream. As Ed Reifman says, it's a simulation, right? And the purpose of the dream is to arouse our commitment and our connection to God. The purpose of everything in the world is to arouse our commitment and connection to God. That's what Joseph did with his brothers. It all started with a couple dreams, right? He had a dream that his brothers would bow down to him. When they came, he said, "I am going to arouse the love and regret that they will be so sorry at what they did, and they will love me again." And the same thing with King Solomon. He used this as an opportunity to arouse the motherly love for that child. And that's the same thing as exile. The purpose of exile is to arouse the love we have for God and God having love for us. You know, sometimes we're saved by something and we say, "Wow, thank God." We say it all the time, right? Then our philosophical side gets to us and says, "Wait, thank God for saving me from the problem He started in the first place," right? He made the problem and He wants credit for saving me. That's true if exile is real. But if exile is but a dream, we're able to say, "Wow, God made these problems in order for me to realize that He's there for me." And that's the same thing with the books on Hey Tavis. It caused tremendous pain. The whole thing caused tremendous pain to the Rebbe that his own nephew was fighting against him. But ultimately, when it went into the court case, and the American non-Jewish Gentile judge said, "You know what a Rebbe is? Let me explain what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe is someone who transcends the world, and Judaism is something transcend." And the Gentile judge realized that. Then we understood what we have. We understood what the Jewish books are. We understood that books are not just paper and ink. These are actually the souls of our history and the souls of our tradition. And that aroused our commitment to God and God's commitment to us through exile. And we'll come to the time when Mashiach comes and we'll say, "Wow, what a dream." We'll wake up sweating, say, "Whoa, what a dream that was." All right, anyways, we'll stop there. Some of the big, I'll just send some of the links. The big sales are kihatonline.com. I always recommend the blue chumash that some of you have, that they have. Every Jewish bookstore now today has a sale. They have the biggest sales, but sometimes not every book is on sale so much. And if you want, you can personally message me and I'll give you some recommendations. Subota is a book that Phyllis, did you finish it? Not yet. Subota is a book people have been reading. I was blown away by that book. I mean, talk about a guy who's 20 years in prison and realizes it's just a dream. I was blown away by that book. There are many other books which are out there which are reprinted every year. There are good old classical books. The only problem with the sale today is a lot of times it takes like a month for them. They're so overloaded. It takes like a month for them to ship them out. But they're great books. All right, we'll stop here.